Okay, we're going to start with the male reproductive system, and by talking about that, we're going to start with the primary sex organs. The primary sex organs in the males are going to be the gonads or the testes. In females, it's going to be ovaries, which I'll do in the next one. So the testes or ovaries are going to produce two things. One of them are going to be sex cells and also sperm. So the gametes are the sex cells, and they're going to secrete a sex hormone. In males, it's called androgen, and specifically it'll be testosterone. In females, it's estrogen and progesterone. The accessory reproductive organs are going to be the ducts, the glands, and the external genitalia that make up a male. The sex hormones play a role in development and functioning of the reproductive organs. They are also going to be involved with sexual behavior and drives, and also the growth and development of many other organs and tissues. The testes are going to be located in the scrotum outside of the body, and they are going to produce sperm. Sperm is going to be delivered to the outside of the body through a series of ducts that start at the epididymis, that go to the ductus or vas deferens, into the ejaculatory duct, and then finally into the urethra. So if you remember that term urethra, that is also how you're going to get urine out of your body. So the accessory sex glands are going to be those that secrete something, such as the seminal vesicles, the prostate, and the bulbourethral glands, which are also called the Bowman glands. And they're going to empty secretions into the ducts during ejaculation. In this mid-sagittal view, you can kind of see some of the parts that I'm going to be talking about, and I'll just point some of them out. So here is the scrotum here, and inside of the scrotum is going to be the testes. Inside of the testes is going to be the seminiferous tubules that will make the sperm, and I'll show you that picture a little bit later. So after you look at this, there looks like this comma-shaped thing on top of the testes, and that basically is called the epididymis. The epididymis has a whole bunch of tubes going through it, and then it's going to go up and over and around and eventually pick up some of the secretions from the seminal vesicles. It'll also pick up some of the secretions of the prostate, and then it's also going to, before ejaculation, pick up the secretions of the bulbourethral glands, which is also called the Cowper's glands. So you can kind of see the urethra is going to go from here through the prostatic urethra, then through this membranous intermediate part of the urethra. It changes names, and then it's going to go down here, and it used to be called the penile urethra. It's now called the spongy urethra. So if you look at this, so this is how urine would go. It's going to go from the bladder, work its way down here, and then eventually come out of the penis there. But prior to that, the same tubular network is going to have the secretions from the bulbourethral glands secreted into the same tube here, and they'll also be ejaculated out. In addition to that, we're going to have the seminal gland secretions that'll come out this ejaculatory duct into the same urinary tube, and also the prostate gland will have a tube here that will go into the same tube that's going to go out of the penis. So there are a lot of tubes in the male system. I'm going to stay on this one for 1 second, only in the sense that here is the tube that goes through and out of the penis here. On either side of it is going to be the corpus spongiosum. So the corpus spongiosum, this blue on either side of this pink tube here, is going to have a responsibility of maintaining an erection during ejaculation. You really don't want anyone to step on your garden hose so that you can't have urine come out the other end. And that's a great way of remembering it. So the corpus spongiosum makes sure that this tube doesn't ever get someone stepping on it or crimped or whatever. And so the corpus spongiosum's purpose is to maintain the openness or patency of that tube as it's going through it. In addition to that, you're also going to have two, and you can only see one in a mid-sagittal view, of the corpus cavernosa. And so that's going to be filled with blood, and that's what's going to be responsible for the erection. Some of the other things that I'll show you in a different picture is going to be, well, the scrotum is going to be a sac of skin that will contain the testes located outside of your body. If it's so important, why do you think it's located outside of your body? Well, the second line here tells you why. It's because in order to make viable sperm, you have to have 3 degrees Celsius lower than your core body temperature. So basically, for sperm production, it is going to hang outside of the body so it doesn't get too hot. The temperature must be kept constant by 2 sets of muscles. One of them, the cremaster muscle, is a band of skeletal muscles that is in a continuation of the internal oblique muscle, and so when it gets activated, it can pull the testes closer to your body. If you are a guy taking this course, you kind of know if you've gone into really cold water, the testes will get really close to your body. In addition to that, the dartos muscles are smooth muscles that will wrinkle the scrotal sac. It's also going to pull the scrotum closer to the body. I kind of think of these muscles as the fins in a radiator, because that's what a radiator does. It cools down the engine as you have air going over it. So between the cremaster muscles and the dartos muscles, it's going to be responsible for making sure that if you're producing sperm, it's going to be viable or be able to be used. So you can kind of see it in this picture here. Here's the testes here. Here is this cremaster muscle, which is a continuation of the internal oblique, and it is a skeletal muscle. And when you get really cold, a male's testes will rise closer to the body to keep them warm. In addition, you can see this cord here, which is called a spermatocord, and so it's going to going through it the muscles that you can see on this side, but it's also going to have a lot of nerve endings, and it's going to have blood vessels and stuff like that, in addition to the tube that's going to come up and around and go over and out, so that we have a continuous, after you make the sperm, it's going to go up and around and down and then eventually out the penis. So each septum in the testes is divided into 250 lobules, and each of them are going to have 1 to 4 seminiferous tubules. So it is actually the seminiferous tubules that is the site of sperm production, even though they're found within the testes. Let me just get a picture of that. So here's what it looks like. When I teach it in class, I usually think that the seminiferous tubules looks like ramen noodle soup. A good way to remember it. And so as the sperm is being produced in all of these tubes here, they are going to have to go and travel up and down and over and around and over, and then it's going to be stored and matured in this epididymis. The epididymis is kind of a comma-shaped structure over the testes itself. And so as you're producing sperm in the seminiferous tubules, it's going to have to spend a long time storing and maturing it, and eventually it's going to then leave the testes in this tube here, which is called the vas deferens or the ductus deferens. So this tube here is, you've made the sperm, it's gone through a long journey, it's stored and matured, and eventually during ejaculation it's going to go up and over and then eventually out of the penis. So the seminiferous tubules are the structure that actually makes the sperm inside of the testes. Let's see, some of the other stuff that you need to know about it is going to be, the way that we talk about it in anatomy is the penis is going to be the male copulatory organ. So the penis will go inside of the vagina of the female, and that is going to be what's going to convey the sperm and the ejaculation secretions into the female. And if they get lucky, they'll hook up with an egg, and you can kind of make a kid. The external genitalia of the male is going to be the scrotum and the penis. The penis is outside of the body, and like I said a second ago, it is the male copulatory organ. And the scrotum is basically going to house the testes, where within the testes the seminiferous tubules are going to make sperm. Some of the other things about the penis is it's going to have a root and a shaft, and at the end of the shaft, what you would in lay language call the head is called the glans penis. No D in that. So the glans penis is going to be a enlarged end at the end of the penis, and there is also a foreskin. Usually in the United States, the prepuce or the foreskin is removed kind of when the baby's about 0 years old. So they do it as early as possible, and basically then most people, or most males in the United States, have had a circumcision, which means they've cut off that foreskin, or prepuce. That's the actual anatomical name for it. As it says there, 60% of newborn boys in the United States are circumcised. It's a lot less in other parts of the world. And particularly in Africa, Bill Gates has donated millions of dollars to try and get more and more boys circumcised. And the reason for that is it will show, or it will reduce, the spread of HIV risk. So that's a big thing that he's been involved with. How can you stop the spread of HIV? Well, just by being circumcised is one thing, or one way that you can do that. Some of the other slender or erectile tissues in the penis are going to be, as I mentioned before, the corpus spongiosum. It surrounds the urethra and expands to form the glans and the bulb of the penis. And then there's also going to be dorsal paired erectile bodies. When those erectile tissues get engorged with blood, we have the penis getting enlarged and becomes rigid, and in that particular case, you have an erection. So if you look at this one here, it shows you everything in this view here. Here is the bladder up here. Here are the seminal glands here. Here is the prostate, and there's a tube going right through the center of the prostate. If you're a male, one of the poor designs here is if this encapsulated prostate gets enlarged, it's called benign prostatic hypertrophy. So as males get older, what happens, it truly is as if someone is crimping down on your garden hose. So in order to urinate, you need to be able to open that back up. However, they do that, and then in order to have urine to come out of the body. So you can see in this particular view, this part down here is showing you the corpus spongiosum, which is around the urethra. I always think and tell people this looks like a monkey's face. Here are the two eyes of the monkeys. They are the corpora cavernosa with their deep arteries in the center of it. And down here, the mouth of the monkey has the urethra in the center of it. So surrounding the urethra, or the opening, is going to be this corpus spongiosum. And these tissues here are going to be the ones that will fill with blood in order to give you an erection. You can see the prepuce still shown here, and in this particular case, this picture has not been circumcised, which would be the removal of that foreskin there. But as long as you got the idea that these two erectile tissues are the corpora cavernosa, and these erectile tissues will fill with blood, and at the same time, this corpus spongiosum will make sure that the opening here does not get crimped, so that when all of the fluids that leak out of the male, they produce sperm, which will come up and over and go around here. But prior to that, you're going to have the secretions of the bulbourethral glands, which is also called the Cowper's glands, and their secretions are going to be first. They're going to lubricate the glans pubis, or the glans penis, and basically provide some sort of frictionless surface as this penis is going into the vagina. In addition to that, because this tube is used for urine, and that's not going to be really good for having viable sperm, the secretions that leave the body first are going to be the secretions of the bulbourethral glands that are going to neutralize any acidic urine that's left in that tube. So they do two things. They're going to neutralize any acidic urine that's left in there, and because they're super duper slippery, they're going to lubricate the glans penis. At the same time that this sperm is working its way out there, it's going to pick up the secretions of the seminal gland and also some of the secretions of the prostate. But the first one that's going to be leaked out is going to be the bulbourethral gland secretions, and its purpose is to lubricate the glans pubis. Secondarily, if you look at this thing here, inside of the testes is going to be the seminiferous tubules. And remember, they're going to produce the sperm in all of the stuff that looks like ramen noodles soup. Then it's going to be stored and matured in the epididymis, which truly does look like a comma over the testes. Then it's going to work its way up through here, all the way up, pick up some secretions from the seminal gland, pick up some secretions with the prostate, and then after the secretions of the bulbourethral gland has made sure that the pathway is cleared, they are then going to be leaving the body. Leaving the body is called ejaculation. So the ducts carry sperm from the testes to the body's exterior through the epididymis. Remember, that's the comma-shaped thing. The ductus deferens is also called the vas deferens. That's why when they cut that, it's called a vasectomy. The ejaculatory duct, and then finally into the urethra. The epididymis is going to have a head, a body, and a tail. And it's also going to have sperm in it. There is going to be old sperm and new sperm. And so through the ductus deferens or the vas deferens, it is then going to pass in through the inguinal canal into the pelvic cavity. So it has a big journey, and the part down here says the vasectomy is cutting and ligating the ductus deferens. Ligating means to tie it off. Cutting means they actually cut it apart. And I like the last line where it says it's nearly 100% effective form of birth control. That means that if you are going to have a vasectomy and you have gone and had it checked to make sure that you are not shooting out live sperm, you can then say that you are not going to impregnate someone. A couple years ago, I had a student whose husband had a vasectomy, but she still got pregnant by him because he had some Michael Phelps swimmers, some really strong swimmers who were able to get her pregnant, and I'm sure it led to some interesting conversations. So as the sperm is created here, and it goes up here and up here, picks up the secretions of the seminal gland, picks up the secretions of the prostate, and prior to it going through here, it has to go through the same tube that you would have in a male or a female. But it has 3 locations where it changes names. When it goes through the prostate, it is called the prostatic urethra, as you can see here. When it goes through the urogenital diaphragm, it used to be called the membranous urethra. It is now called the intermediate part of the urethra. So prostatic urethra, intermediate part of the urethra, and then as it goes through the penis itself, it goes through the spongy urethra, but if you say it's the penile urethra, that's how I learned it when I was going through this too, and then it will come out the external urethral orifice. So the same thing that's going to come out of the external urethral orifice is going to be urine and also ejaculation, which will include the sperm and the sperm secretions. So here is the secretions, or the glands that are going to make the secretions, and they're going to make up the majority of the semen that are going to be released from a male body. The seminal glands are going to produce a viscous alkaline seminal fluid that does 2 things. It's going to make up the majority of the semen, all of that has been ejaculated, but it's also going to contain fructose and also a coagulating enzyme called versculase. Fructose is going to be the sugar that the sperm will have so that they will be able to swim into the female's vagina and into their uterus. Interestingly, and if you've watched any cop shows, if they think that there is ejaculation on the floor or on the carpet or something like that, if you have an ultraviolet light, it'll show up yellow. So if you've ever watched SCI or one of those shows and they have this ultraviolet light, you can actually see the semen secretions on it. because it picks up the ultraviolet light. So that's the seminal glands. That's most of the secretions that will come out in semen. The prostate is also going to secrete a milky, acidic, slightly acidic fluid. In it is going to have something called the PSA. And for males, you usually want to get your PSA levels checked to make sure you're not having a problem with your prostate. In addition to that, during ejaculations play a role in sperm activation. So as the sperm has been ejaculated out of the male, it has to go into the female, and it has to have an uphill battle, because the female's body is going to see that as a foreign fluid and they want to kill it off. So you are going to have to be a Michael Phelps swimmer in order to make it out of the male body into the female body, and also fight through all of the defenses that the female is going to have. So in addition to the amount that the seminal glands make, which they say is 70% of the volume of semen, another third of that is going to be from the prostate gland that's going to secrete it out. Two things that they're mentioning here are prostatitis, which is inflammation of the prostate for a number of reasons. But the second one is benign prostatic hypertrophy. They refer to it as BPH. It may be age-related. It distorts the urethra, and it sometimes is treated with surgery, balloons, radiofrequency surgery, so that you can have an open so that you can urinate. The bulbourethral glands, as I mentioned before, is the Cowper glands. It's a pea-sized gland inferior to the prostate. It produces a very thick, clear mucus during sexual arousal. It's going to lubricate the glans penis, but in addition to that, it's going to neutralize any traces of acidic urine that's left in the urethra. And so these two guys are the bulbourethral glands, these little tiny circles there, and their secretions will get here, and they're going to be the first ones that are going to be ejaculated out during arousal. So semen is a combination of sperm and the accessory gland secretions. And if you look at it, in every 2 to 5 milliliters of semen that are ejaculated. So a milliliter is about a cc. And so that is about one little eyedropper drop full of ejaculation. Each one of them are going to contain between 20 and 150 million sperm per milliliter. So that's going to be per cc. So that means the way that it works is going to be that it is not one sperm and one egg. They are going to launch 250 million sperm, and it's more of a shotgun effect rather than a sniper bullet. So the sperm accessory gland secretions are going to contain fructose. Remember, I mentioned that was going to be in the seminal glands. That's going to be for activating the ATP production. It's going to protect and activate the sperm so that these guys can make it out of the male body into the female body. And it's going to also facilitate the sperm movement. So it is alkaline. It'll neutralize any of the acidity of the male urethra and also the female vagina. Because as when we get into the female portion, the vagina is going to be slightly acidic to kill off any bacteria that might be in there. And it's also going to jumpstart their swimming, which is going to be out of the male body into the female body. The semen's functions are basically going to be keeping the sperm alive. So it's going to activate the ATP for energy. And this one's interesting. In addition to that, it's going to suppress the female immune response. So as I mentioned a couple minutes before, the female doesn't want this foreign stuff inside of them, and they're going to try and kill it. Well, we're not going to continue to have babies if every time a female has a penis inside of them, it destroys anything that's been leaked out of them. So the semen are going to try to suppress that female immune response so that you have a fighting chance to at least get that sperm into them. It also has an antibacterial action, and most of you have probably figured out that everything in the body is designed to make sure that bacteria is not going to invade our bodies. An erection, by definition, is going to be a sexual excitement that causes the central nervous system's activation of the parasympathetic neurons. When that happens, There's a release of nitric oxide. The local vascular smooth muscles will relax. The arterioles will dilate. The corpus cavernosa will expand. And when it does that, it's going to make sure that you're not going to have any loss of venous drainage. So it's going to make sure that that happens. There's going to be engorgement of the erectile tissues with blood. And by definition, enlargement and stiffening of the penis is called an erection. Doesn't sound exciting, but that's exactly how it works. One of the things that I pass along to all of my students is it's going to be involving the parasympathetic nervous system. All they do in all of the textbooks is put one line. And you have to remember that the erection is due to the parasympathetic nervous system. The erection can be initiated by sexual stimulus, mechanical stimulation, erotic sights, sounds, and smells. It can be induced by emotions or higher activity. It can also go the other way. You can think yourself out of an erection by thinking too much. So the corpus spongiosum makes sure that the urethra stays open during ejaculation, because as I said, you really don't want someone stepping on your garden hose. One of the things that I always get students asking about is, can you break a penis? There is no bone in the penis, but you can have kinking and buckling of an erect penis. So you have an erect penis up, and all of a sudden it misses the hole, and it is an actual medical emergency when you have it snapping. Kind of think of a frozen hot dog that you just snapped. I just want you to have a visual image of that. And so there'll be a lot of blood going into the scrotum. So ejaculation is going to be under the sympathetic nervous system. So one of the things that I learned when I was teaching at St. Luke's is the point and shoot method. Pointing is going to be the erection portion of it, of the autonomic nervous system. And it's under the parasympathetic nervous system. The shooting is going to be the ejaculation, and that is going to be under the sympathetic. So point and shoot is one of those things in anatomy that allows you to not have to think, but it's going to be the pointing, which is the parasympathetic, which is going to be the erection, and the shooting, which is going to be the ejaculation, is under the sympathetic nervous system. During ejaculation, a bunch of things are going to happen. One, the bladder sphincter muscles will constrict so that you're not peeing at the same time that you're ejaculating. All of the ducts and accessory glands will contract and empty their contents. And if you do the math here, expulsion of semen is at approximately 500 centimeters per second, which is close to 11 miles an hour. When that happens, that is called ejaculation, a climax, an orgasm, and anything that you want to call it. And so all of those things are going to happen at the same time. If for some reason you can't get an erection as a male, sometimes it's due to too much alcohol, drugs, hormones, and incompetent valves. And if you watch any sporting event, they always advertise Cialis and Viagra. Viagra used to be a blood pressure medication, but they found out it works just as well to make sure that you have an erection during a time with erectile dysfunction. Sperm is going to be produced, as I mentioned before, by the seminiferous tubules, and this is a whole bunch of stuff that you'll probably get in the lecture portion. Let me just get to the sperm here. Here is, let's get a good picture here, okay. So the sperm is this guy here. It has a head, it has a mid-piece, and it has a tail. So these guys are going to do angulating type of swimming, which is kind of how a snake does the swimming. So as these are ejaculated out of the male during the process of ejaculation, it is now going to be the swimmer who has to go into the female, get by the female's defenses, and reach an egg, and potentially you could have a baby. That's about all that I'm going to talk about with that. In addition to that, some of the cells, in addition to making sure that you can have the sperm survive, that are going to be involved are called the Sertoli cells, and those are going to make sure that the sperm can secrete testicular fluid into the lumen for sperm transport. I'm not going to ask you any about that. I'm just going to ask you about the parts. And that's the end of the male reproductive system.